Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. We are on Facebook and Twitter. Follow us on social media at SWGM Podcast. Stop by the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, share, watch the content there. The shows are there as well as some actual live plays and other content. That's at youtube.com/Savage Worlds GM Podcast. And check us also out on iTunes. Same moniker, Savage Worlds GM Podcast. If you like what we do and you want to get involved, feel free to throw us a buck. Subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/Savage Worlds GM Podcast. Or actually, yeah, that's right. SWGM Podcast, sorry. And if you're watching the live stream, feel free to comment. We do bring that into the chat. Tonight's in honor of Talk Like a Pirate Week. Me Matties. Tonight we're talking pirates. And here to discuss it, Dustin, the Savage Zealot Smith.
I will not let an Atlantean run this ship.
Dave, walk the plank rules, Maven Scott.
You know, at some point you have to decide. Does everyone have steady hands?
And Chris, the Savage Mommy Fox.
Say, what a salty spray you have.
Oh, my.
So, like we said, tonight we're talking pirates. Chris has the singular distinction among the hosts of the podcast here of having written and co-written a pirate setting. Yep. Buccaneer Through Hell and High Water. Go ahead and pimp the shit out of that, Chris.
Yeah. So Buccaneer Through Hell and High Water, you can get it print on demand on all the One Bookshelf sites. So RPG Now, Drive Through RPG. You can get your PDFs up there. We're still working on getting all the one sheets out. We put out some of the one sheets, so we still got work to do. We still have things that we need to put out, but the core books out there in the world, and people are talking about it. Some people have played it, so pretty happy with it. There's some things we learned along the way, but like any first time experience, it's oh wait, that could go down the wrong road. It was our first time, so it was a little awkward.
I haven't had a chance to actually play it yet. I actually, Chris was nice enough to get me an advanced copy of this so I could read through it, especially to make some comparisons with the older Pirates products, 50 Fathoms, Pirates of the Spanish Main, because I had literally just finished 6 months earlier the conversion to put Pirates of the Spanish Main on Fantasy Grounds, so I was very familiar with that material. So I mean, I've read it cover to cover, and I'm fairly familiar with it, and it's a great product. I just haven't had a group to play that with, and well, I've kind of been heads down in other projects.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we need to do, and we just have to find time as a group, the other, Landauer and my friend Brett and I, we need to write up a better explanation, kind of an example of ship combat. We thought it was pretty clear, but there's still some people who are like, well, I don't know that I completely understand ship combat. And our ship combat is different, than what was in 50 Fathoms, what was in Pirates of the Spanish Main. We still think it's the triple F, but it's got a little more meat to it.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that would be nice, that if we could get a video put together or just get something out there. But, we're all so busy. Brett just started a brand new job. I've got just 8 zillion things going on, but, it'll happen. There's a new edition coming out that might have to cause us to do a little tweaking of some things.
I know that Shane has said that there's going to be a new version of the chase rules. Did they mention there's some new vehicle rules coming with that?
I don't know how much I can say on that.
Okay, I'm only talking obviously about anything he said publicly.
Right. He did mention some. He did mention. I know he mentioned publicly that they did make some changes to vehicles. It's not major though. I think he said that there's not major changes. If I recall him saying
that was the thing. I know he very specifically called out the chase rules. I couldn't remember if he had said there was actual vehicle rule changes or if it was just there's been some vehicle changes to bring them in line with the new chase rules or something. Which probably is more likely, but at least that way, there's no reason for you guys to re-release a write-up on the ship combat until you've got those new.
Yeah, and I could say we probably would not be using the new chase rules because our ship combat is kind of a dramatic task.
Yeah.
With a chase kind of combined a little bit.
In all reality, it comes very close to mirroring the other mechanic you guys created, the chaos situation mechanic.
Right, yes.
It's very similar, and I think that's what throws people, is that it's close enough that you can confuse the two,
right,
rather than understanding the difference between them.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and the whole chaos mechanic is that same thing. It's a dramatic task with a chase.
Yeah.
It's using those chase rules, but then adding skills and what happens when you use particular skills based off the card that you get, things can happen. And like everything in Savage Worlds, clubs cause complications. And, building out a chaos encounter is kind of one of those things. You can do it on the fly, but it's also one of those things that if you know a little bit ahead of time, kind of what you want to do. And the one I believe we used was the island and the volcanoes erupting and they're trying to get back to their ship. And basically they're being chased by not only the lava, but all the animals and everything. And they're having to run down the mountain. And so not only is the lava chasing them, but they're having all the different skills to try to get themselves down the mountain. Can they use a survival skill to quickly find a shortcut and, or are they going to use athletics, which was not available when we wrote our book. But are they going to use that to do something, to like jump over that tree and all of those types of things? So, there may be some errata that we may want to end up looking at doing, but that's, a little bit down the line until we get, a better view of what's out there and what's coming.
So, sorry, go ahead, Jared.
I was going to say, so I was just wondering, what we want to talk about as far as, if you're going to run your own pirate campaign, or you're going to use something out of the book, you're going to use an existing setting to do it. I kind of want to talk about, the topic a little bit too.
So I think, at least for me, especially with the changes we're seeing now with the upcoming Adventure Edition, is I think there's going to be a lot more of that kind of swashbuckly style play enforced by the mechanics. I think things like the changes to athletics, the changes to thievery, but more importantly, the new test rule they just released, where I can quite literally say, hey, I'm going to, swing on the chandelier, and the effect I want that to have is to distract everyone in the room or to make them more vulnerable or whatnot. I think that is going to be a huge boon to that whole doing the impromptu creative thing, but having control over the effect it has on the mechanics. Great pod.
It is awesome pod.
I think it might, and with those tests, you can use any skill, but you have to still narrate it, and your GM can still give you minuses if they think it's going to be way too difficult. But I think like the swing on the chandelier and being able to distract, the people in the room, that sounds like a great use of it to me. I think pirates, basically, you have to look at what kind of, I guess the best way to say it is, what kind of pirate game are you looking for? Because you've got the 50 Fathoms, which is fantasy pirates. It's Pirates of Dark Water. Shane's even mentioned that Pirates of Dark Water was one of his favorite shows and an inspiration. Then you've got Pirates of the Spanish Main, which is more historical. Then you have, Buccaneer Through Hell and High Water, where we wanted to stay more in reality, but we added some fantastical elements to it. There's no, everybody has to be human, so there's no fantasy races, but there's monsters, and there's a portal that's been broken in the ocean that's spitting up this ichor that's fucking up the world basically. So you have to look at.
Thought that Buccaneer was kind of Pirates of the Spanish Main turned to 11, because I always hear people talk about how Pirates of the Spanish Main was more historical. And then I stop and I think about the ghost pirates and ghost ships and the sea monsters and stuff.
I guess I haven't read it. I haven't read into Pirates of the Spanish Main as deeply.
Isn't it more like Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah. Pirates of the Spanish Main is very much your Pirates of the Caribbean. It's got all the fantastical elements, but they're not fantasy races. It's not overt like player characters wielding magic through arcane backgrounds. Instead, like if you run into powers in Pirates of the Spanish Main, it's because an NPC is using them against you, or you run into a mythical beast that's using a specialty power like sirens, etc. But the interesting thing to me, unfortunately, is that 50 Fathoms gets talked about as having this great plot point campaign and there's this great setting, and Buccaneer has a lot of legs under it because it's so new. Pirates kind of died on the vine because they never released the additional content for it due to a falling out that happened.
Yeah, it was a licensing issue, I believe, wasn't it?
License holder, because the license holder went kind of belly up, and so you had this great product that never went anywhere.
Which is Pirates of the Spanish Main. You could run any Savage Worlds game because they pretty much put Savage Worlds Deluxe into Pirates of the Spanish Main. That's what made it such a large book.
Right. Yeah, it had all the rules in it.
Yeah.
If you look at a lot of the PEG products, though, like Deadlands does the same thing. You don't ever need to actually crack the core book to play Deadlands because it's got all the Savage Worlds rules right in the book that you buy for Deadlands. ETU is similar in that regard too. A lot of the like mainline PEG stuff does that.
Right. I kind of want to, since our subject is going to be pirates, I kind of want to see if we could touch on how that's sort of genre specific, like how does that, like, in a universal setting, what separates a crew of pirates from, say, special forces or colonial rangers or even a Deadlands posse? Like, what do you guys think is the lifeblood of a pirate game, genre-wise?
I would have to say that I think genre-wise, it has to be about shares and profiteering. It needs money needs to be a big focus of it. Greed needs to be a big focus of it. Opportunities to conduct piracy need to be a big focus of a pirate game. I think that's so much of that is there's so much of the Errol Flynn focus on pirates of fluffy shirt swinging across the deck on a rope, haha.
Right, sorting your teeth.
Yeah, that seems to be what's put forth in a lot of gaming and a lot of video and everything else of this whole swashbuckling thing. But I think it's really more the Pirates of the Caribbean thing. It's in order to get ahead, you had to backstab somebody to take that opportunity, and the whole time, if you're being a good pirate, you are racking up enemies everywhere you go, and everybody wants your head.
So I would say if you want a correlation to kind of what you're talking about, Jared and Dustin, to say what makes pirates. I know some people didn't care for it. Black Sails.
Yeah,
I loved Black Sails. Black Sails was backstabbing and bribery and working for one faction, and then all of a sudden you flip and now you're working for a different faction. It was showing how difficult life on the sea was. People were losing limbs all the time because boats were crushing them and people were chopping them off. And there's I'll go ahead and say it. There was all the brothels and all the the shore leave. I mean, you don't have to get deep into that stuff, but I mean, a lot of games talk about cabin fever and getting off of the ship for X amount of time,
Right.
because you have to be able to blow off that steam somehow. So you're going to gamble and go to the brothel and drink and do all those things, which I think need to be, to me, just as much a part of a pirate game as sailing the ship and being out to sea, because you can do a lot of intrigue and a lot of things in a city. You go to Tortuga, and in Tortuga, you could have just all kinds of adventures and all kinds of things happen in that city environment, and you could spend multiple sessions running what's going on in a pirate city.
I want to throw something out there in terms of mechanics. And Dave, I think you're like the expert on this one because you've run several Pirates of the Spanish Main. Use as a setting rule, everybody has the poverty hindrance, and that represents the carousing and the drunkenness and the living it up afterwards.
Well, Pirates of the Spanish Main actually has a carousing rule.
Mm-hmm.
You roll I believe it's a D6 for every day that they spend ashore to see how much gold they blow through and how poor they are when they get back to the ship.
Right.
So there is definitely that, and it also deals with cabin fever very specifically as a mechanic. The X number of days at sea starts to basically weigh in kind of this fatigue style penalty that just draws on everything the player characters are going to do thereafter. But I think that, so the poor hindrance, there's a benefit to that, but there's also that's too abstract, because now you're just automatically deducting half their wealth all the time, and you're not ever touching on the debauchery. You're not ever touching on the carousing. You're not ever touching on those things. I think if you want a carousing mechanic that's not just a simple dice roll like that, one of the best ones actually appears in Beasts and Barbarians, where they actually have this chart that you're drawing cards against to see what happened when you went carousing last night in the Conan the Barbarian style. This idea that you got into a bar brawl and spent all your money on repairs to the bar, or you got into a drinking contest and won a 500 gold because you drank everyone in the town under the table and stuff like that. There's some really interesting stuff that can come up that way to make it a little more random. Personally, though, I always found the experiences that my players enjoyed the most were the ones where I actually told a story. If they went ashore to go carousing, we actually told the story of, well, what happens when you get to the bar? And no, I wouldn't necessarily go into deep details of how long they drank or, whether or not they betted a wench or anything like that. But what I would do is, and there was a thief that happened to pick somebody's pocket in front of you, or there was the maiden that needed saving. The problem with Pirates of the Spanish Main, specifically in that regard, is the book starts with this concept that you're all the lovable, good-hearted pirates. And I've never once had a single game of Pirates of the Spanish Main where at least one of my players didn't just want to be a dastardly, down and dirty, nasty, greedy pirate.
So I have a question.
I think it's the expectation of the genre, right? Oh, we're going to play pirates. Oh, I'm going to be a murdering, thieving, dastardly ass.
I think to a certain extent, people just immediately think they're playing the bad guy when they sign up for a pirate campaign. But what was your question, Chris?
Well, we can continue this. I just have another topic I wanted to throw out and see what you guys think. So we'll continue this, and then we can just go on to the topic when you guys think it's a good time.
So I think there is absolutely that whole evil campaign idea that ends up kind of floating in the background of just about any pirate game. Again, you can get the buy-in that everyone's going to be the Will Turner, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, in all reality, the privateer style pirate game. But honestly, I think most players are out for that down and dirty, gritty, nasty, greedy pirates. Everything's profit motivated. And like Jared said, you've got to know how many shares do each of the characters get. And let them role play that stuff. Let them have, you know, a half hour to talk amongst themselves in character about who gets to be the captain, who gets to be the quartermaster. Does the ship get its own share to pay for the repairs that it's doing, or does everybody have to chip up equally for that? Like, there's a lot that goes into that stuff that so many people kind of hand wave or treat it like it's just, oh, that's just record keeping. When no, that's the meat of a story about greed, is making them role play how they divide up the spoils.
Right. And it also leads to, you know, the idea in role playing, and it can evolve narratively. Okay, so we all decide Dustin's the captain. And Dustin doesn't want to necessarily be the captain, but there's more shares in it. And Dustin's greedy. So, okay, I'll be the captain. And then we set sail, and Dustin makes some poor decisions that cost us a lot of our shares. And now we're all like, hey, we need to hang this guy from the missing mass and mutiny, because he's screwing our bottom line. The longer he's in charge, the more money we keep losing.
You see that small island? You're now governor of that island. Here's your pistol with one shot. Goodbye.
All right, so I'm going to throw it out there since both of you have already brought it up. What I wanted to talk about.
Mutiny?
No, do you think that you should have a player be the captain, or should the captain be an NPC so you don't have all of that issue of party infighting trying to be the captain? Now, I've done this, and I've let the players be the captain, and it did lead to that. But I also started one where they had an NPC captain. He got shot. His hat falls, and they all go diving for the hat because he who wears the hat is the captain.
Right.
You know, so what's your feeling on that? Do you guys feel like a player should be the captain, or should that be delegated to an NPC?
I think it should depend on your group. I really do. And you know, it seems like we'll put on your big boy pants discussion bullshit. It sounds like so much pandering and rhetoric. But if your group enjoys there are people who enjoy inter-party role-play conflict and can do it without getting butthurt personally outside of the game. Yeah. I mean, there are people who can do that and enjoy doing that.
A step farther and say, depending on your group, you might also have a group who has a natural leader among the players that everyone naturally turns to.
Right.
So they can have a PC as the captain and not have that inter-party conflict. It's not just an inter-party conflict thing, as much as it can just be downright the chemistry of the group.
Sure.
Whether or not it works for them to have a captain.
And I think you need to, though, make sure that person's okay with that, obviously. You know, because like you said, maybe Dustin doesn't want to play the captain, but Dustin's kind of the guy who's the natural leader at the table. He's the most boisterous, you know. He's the one who role plays to the hill. But he doesn't want to be the captain.
I've got news for you. The person who doesn't want to be the captain is going to be the captain.
That's how I got to be the captain.
Yeah.
I'm the captain now.
We
were playing a Firefly. We thought, hey, we'll play a little Firefly thing. The first thing I said is, I don't want to be the captain. Guess who was the captain?
Right.
I literally was like lobbying for the NPC captain. And Jared was lobbying against the NPC captain, and I had a hindrance.
Just to force Dustin to squirm as the captain.
And we ended up like completely obliterating our arch nemesis at that point. I was like, my God, all right, my character was the Alex Jones of the Caribbean because he thought that the Atlanteans were taking over the world. Like, I almost could.
Atlanteans existed in that game, and you never ran into any.
The craziest thing is I was right. Like my character almost committed suicide on the beach because he thought the crew had been taken over. And this is before they make me captain.
I'm going to say this, Chris. The question is kind of front-loaded, assuming that there's going to be conflict if a player character is a captain. I don't think that's necessarily always going to be the case.
And I agree. It won't always be the case. I think, and that's kind of the answer that I would give, that you gave, and I expected at least one of us to give, is read your table and know your players.
So I think there's also an aspect, and again, this is one of those spots where I can point to Pirates of the Spanish Main as making a few mistakes. Don't ever make someone pay edges to be the fucking captain.
Right.
The ship is fucking free. No one has to buy an edge that says I'm the captain, because that person ends up feeling completely dicked by the end of the first session because they're now an edge more powerless than everyone else. Because here's the thing. Do you know what a boat is in a pirate game?
Flotsam?
It's that thing that's always there, no matter whether you paid for it or not.
Well, and I think this is the situation too. The other downside to the NPC captain idea, it feels a little dickish because now I've got a GM PC in the game that's in charge of all the other players, and it's just like
the in charge of the other players part that really becomes an issue for me. I don't like role playing a character that gives orders to other player characters.
Sure,
I think
I can see that.
I think it'd be interesting to pose or posit the idea of a NPC allied extra captain that all the players control equally.
Yeah, there you go. That's a easy way to solve it.
I kind of feel like if you're going to be the captain and your player is the captain, it's kind of like, how well can you herd cats? Like,
yeah. Well, it's interesting to watch a player be. I mean, when you do a player character captain, that basically becomes a secondary GM. Yeah. They drive so much of that story, and as a GM, it's kind of fun to sit back and watch them squirm, and have to deal with all the weight of the world on their shoulders. Oh God, I'm a player. I'm supposed to be playing this game, and now I'm managing all these idiots.
Ruben asks if we're going to talk about sky or space pirates, and I mean,
what's the difference?
That's the thing. At the end of the day, the only difference is a coat of trapping paint.
Yeah. They all have ships. They're all pirates.
Your black powder pistol becomes a plasma pistol, or your pirate ship suddenly becomes a B-52 bomber because you're doing Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow. The whole like Crimson Skies. Steampunk Victorian.
Yeah, or, I mean, if you want to look at that, Sundered Skies. Sundered Skies is a Savage Worlds Sky Pirates game. Fantasy kind of Sky Pirates.
They do the whole Spelljammer style thing where it's actual like floating islands in space and actual like ships with rigging that fly between them.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's 50 fathoms with a different coat of paint.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is like there's existing properties out there that do pirates really well, and then you can just wrap the coat of paint you want around them. And if you look, some of the Triple Ace Games products that have come out since Pirates of the Spanish Main came out kind of update some of the rules from Pirates of the Spanish Main. In almost all of their settings, you end up with a kind of a trickle down. Like the whole idea that you don't have to, do a social conflict for haggling over the price. The players roll into port with a ship full of loot. They make a persuasion roll and make that much gold. And done. It's very quick and easy to take a lot of that stuff out. Tag's done some great work on modernizing that. And if you just combine that with any of the other Tag products, like they've got the Tales of the Space Lanes, there's your Space Pirates. They've got the Tales of Pulp Adventure, there's your Sky Pirates. You can take any of the existing products and just kind of mold them to be exactly what you want with very minor changes.
Now I'll say something interesting that I found with the Spanish or Pirates of the Spanish Main. I think they did a very good job with the historical. Hey, just because you're a pirate doesn't mean you know how to swim.
Right.
And historically accurate because so many men who went to sea did not know how to swim.
Right. But yeah.
Most of them were just thieves and thugs from the shore who found themselves on a boat being a thief or a thug on somebody else's boat.
But a lot of times, one of the things historically, and I'm sorry, Jared, I'm going to cut you off.
No, not at all. Go ahead.
One of the things that would happen a lot is that you would get impressed, meaning that the Brits or whoever would wave down your ship and they'd come aboard and they'd take a number of men and impress them into the British Navy. And the British Navy would just like use these guys up. So mutiny was pretty common. I mean, you're literally getting kidnapped, taken to work on a ship, and then people just get sick of it and they overthrow it. And that's how you get so many pirates during that age.
Yeah. One of the best ways you can start a pirate game is to tell all the player characters that they were picked up in the local press gang, and they start out on a ship as the mutiny breaks, and they have to decide what they're going to do. And no matter what the players decide to do, by the end of it, they end up part of whichever side survives with enough people. They kind of end up in controlling aspect of the ship. You still don't want to punish them for making choices. You absolutely want to say, they chose to side with the captain. Well, now they win and the captain's alive, but most of the crew is dead, leaving the player characters to act as the crew as they bring this ship in, and then the captain is going to reward them. Or they side with the mutineers and they help run the captain through or throw him off the plank. And now they have a pirate ship that they have a military vessel they have control of. And again, that eliminates that whole need for somebody to pay to be the guy with a boat.
Right. I mean, anytime you commit a crime at sea, legally you're considered a pirate. So they were very strict back in those days.
And to be fair, you can take the exact same mold and swap it into a post-apocalyptic Mad Max setting where the pirates are the player characters in these souped-up hot rods that chase down all the convoys and steal stuff. Mm-hmm. Or you can play that pirate theme in a lot of different places. It's really quite easy to kind of drop it whole cloth in, regardless of what you're playing.
Right, and like Dustin just said, and they're still called pirates.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think there's a certain charm to playing the Age of Sail, genre of pirates. I think who among us as children didn't fantasy, make believe, pretend we were pirates or cowboys and Indians or army men? My stick. This is my sword. Ha ha! To a duel. Oh, you got me. Oh, you didn't get me. Huh? I mean, there's a certain childlike fascination with we're on the deck of a ship and we're out at sea and it's the 1600s, right? It's like there's that whole talking like a pirate. Oh, someone poked my eye out. Now I get a cool patch. Awesome. That you don't find that like in any other game. Like, oh, I lost the leg and now I have a peg leg. Yeah. I've got my pirate chops.
Well, and I think there's an interesting aspect to this too of because of that, don't get too bogged down in things like where Pirates of Spanish Main has a lot of historical references. You don't have to use any of that. If that's not what you want, if you want more that, we're a bunch of 8-year-olds in the backyard pretending that the picnic table is our pirate ship, fucking rock out with your cock out. Savage Worlds has the framework for you to just absolutely go nuts, and the pirate aspect of it is very easy to kind of bolt on. You don't have to go in depth with like rules for haggling, rules for duels, rules for swordsmanship. You don't need any of that to achieve what we're trying to do, but you have it if you want to do it in the 50 Fathoms where you get the high fantasy, or Hell and High Water, which is kind of a mid fantasy, and Pirates of the Spanish Main, which is low fantasy.
Well, and I think too, what we're saying too is everybody is one thing. If you announce I'm going to run a pirate game. What does everybody think about doing a pirate game? there is instantaneous buy-in. Everybody knows what is expected of them as a player in a pirate game. You don't need to have a mechanic. The role play will take care of itself. Everybody understands what we're doing in a pirate game. Everybody goes, well, wait a minute. What do you mean I can't stab the constable through? What? Or when you go to a local bar, whatever do you do? Oh, we carouse and speak for the shit. Of course you do. Because everybody knows.
We get into a huge fight in the tavern. Well, yes, you do.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's this kind of geek out. Oh, I need to create these great new setting mechanics that are going to be awesome. For something where you have instant buy-in from all the players, they know what the role play is. Not so much. Does everybody need to take boating as a skill, for example? No.
Mm-hmm.
Should everybody take steady hands? Probably. Will they do it? No.
Nope.
There'll be people who will fall off the edge of that boat, and guess what? They'll drown.
And to be fair, as Jib has said on the show before, if something becomes the thing everyone takes, give it to them for free. You can just rule all wild cards automatically have steady hands, and only extras ever suffer the unsteady platform rule. You can just do that because it will cut down on the number of modifiers you have to add and subtract every dice roll. I mean,
right. And you can just announce, hey, everybody's got a D4 boating in this game. You just start with a D4 boating because we're fucking pirates. We're playing a pirate game. You're not, oh, I've never seen a boat before. What am I?
Yeah,
what are these ropes and sails and sheets and shit? I don't know.
Everybody gets a D4, and then you just build it up from there if you think that's your concept.
Yeah.
Now, what I think would be interesting, and hear me out on this, is in a pirate game almost creating classes as almost creating archetypes as classes. Like I want to be the quartermaster. Okay, well, the quartermaster archetype. Here's a quartermaster archetype.
There's a game out that has that.
Dave is looking like, oh God, no, don't do it. Go ahead, Dave. Shit all over the point. Go. Do it.
Yeah, please, because we did that in our game. We put all those different positions on the ship as archetypes if people want to play them.
So archetypes are different from classes. Archetypes is, here's a sample of how you can build this character to do this role. Classes is, oh, look, here's some extra points you get just for saying you want your character to be X, and I'm going to give you all these extra skill points. Fucking go play D&D. and that's me being, a bigot against classes in role-playing games.
You classist bastard.
I'm right there with you, man. Like I hate character class. Like the whole idea of it, like the thing is statted out for you. I mean, it's a little bit different if you're going with like Savage Rifts where they have the iconic frameworks. I can work with that because it's technically a superhero build. But like the whole idea of like this like noodled out sort of, okay, well now you've advanced, so you get to do this now. But why can't I just build the character?
If you were going to do something along those lines for a pirate game, I would suggest something more akin to Traveler or Cyberpunk, where it's the whole life path. What happened in your life that led you to be a pirate? And each draw of that card gives you a hindrance, or it gives you an edge that you have. And, most of what you're going to get are lumps.
And then right as you finish, you draw the card that you die.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, a pirate game, no one grows up the son of a noble aspiring to become a pirate captain as the honor of the family depends upon me being a pirate. No, this isn't the Pirates of Penzance where there's a bunch of guys standing around the lederhosen and dancing on the deck. This is a bunch of guys who are killing for their next meal.
My guy was actually the son of a governor, by the way. So that's even more salt in the wound.
To be fair, your guy that was a son of a governor had a lot of hindrances.
He did.
Life of piracy that he was experiencing.
Yep. I love how we infiltrated the French pirates. Draw on a mustache, put on a beret, carry baguettes. Like, what do you do if they stop you? I hand them a baguette.
So, Dave, I know you're really familiar with Pirates of Spanish Main. What did they have? Did they have a special dueling mechanic?
So, Pirates of Spanish Main had a couple different things. It had basically what it called the fencing schools, and these were these kind of elevated edge chains you could take, where certain ranks, not of the edge, like you would take the edge, but you'd hit like seasoned, and it would unlock this special maneuver that only you had because of that edge. And then you could unlock, at Legendary, you unlocked the school's hidden technique. And you also had some other edges that let you kind of combine those with other fencing schools, things like that. That really added to that duel-esque style of play, because most of those fencing schools came with their own rules on how often you had to pay dues and what you had to do to enter the fencing school and things like that.
It was a little subsystem.
Yeah. It was definitely an interesting thing, and I've recommended it to other people in the past as, you know, kind of a jumping off point for developing things like schools of martial arts and stuff like that. But the other mechanic that it had in it was buried away deep in the GM section is this little blurb where they talk about how a fight is settled aboard the ship. And it's this idea that the two pirates are tied together by the wrist with a length of cord, and then they have a knife fight, and the first one to draw blood wins. They're not allowed to fight any further than that, and that must settle the issue. And if it doesn't, whoever feels that the issue is unsettled is thrown off the fucking ship, because they just don't have time for a bunch of guys fighting each other on board the ship.
Can't we all just get along?
No, but I was thinking, like, with sword duels, were they done as, they weren't done as combats, were they?
Yes, a sword duel was done as a combat in Pirates of the Spanish Main. Again, you had the fencing rules, and you had that specialty dagger fight rule where they were tied together and everything. But no,
somehow I thought they were a dramatic task, kind of like
the closest that Pinnacle's ever come to something like that was the gunfight duel in Deadlands, where you've got, you know, the hand of cards and all of that you end up drawing.
Right, you're making a poker hand.
Which just kind of slows it down a lot.
And I think that's why we don't see something like that in Pirates of the Spanish Main. Remember, Pirates of the Spanish Main was almost entirely out of Wiggy's head. So this is the guy who goes, no, you ran up the wall, flipped over the orc, cut him above the eye, and that's all one dice roll. It's that same mentality of the fast, furious fun. Get it done. Use savage rolls as close as you can.
A lot of actual duels were very short, and a lot of the time they were to first blood, which meant you just scarred the other person. And like we watch in the movies and Captain Blood, they're running up the stairs and they're swinging around on chandeliers. That wasn't it. It was just clipped to the cheek. And in a lot of cases, the people that had the scar on the cheek would wear it as a badge of honor, because it meant that they didn't back down. Even if they lost the duel, they were willing to go there and face someone who they knew was a superior opponent.
Most sword duels, in all reality, if we're talking, you know, historical accuracy, are over after the first exchange.
Yep.
Because
That's it.
combatants are only trying to strike to kill. They're not tapping swords because it looks cool to tap their swords together. If I hit your sword, it's because I'm trying to knock it out of the way so I can stab you in the heart.
There were different levels of it. There were there was the to the death, and then there was to first blood, and
to the pain, right?
To the to the pain took a lot longer, since that was effectively, a very good bluff.
Great bluff.
We're talking about he had to ace like 3 and 4 times.
That's one hell of a persuasion roll.
Right.
You kidding me? That took 5 minutes to deliver. That was a social conflict.
Yeah.
No, there's not really a heavy duel mechanic that I can think of in any of the pirate stuff. But again, I mean, if you wanted something like that, lift it out of Deadlands, because that's where it absolutely exists. And it wouldn't take a lot of work to kind of hammer that into a version that works with swords and especially since, I mean, dueling pistols, I mean, all bets are off as whether you're even going to hit each other.
Right. So, what about, okay, so let's talk about some of the big moments in a pirate game, the kind of, I almost want to say genre obligatory moments. Your shit, battles at sea, and
coming across the British, the British man of war,
right.
And you're in a frigate, and can we take out the man of war and take what do they call it? Now the words just left me. Like, can we win the day? Over the overwhelming odds of a British man of war.
What about the boarding party? Oh shit, they pull up alongside you, drop ramps, or we're being boarded. That's a big deal in a lot of like pirate things, like sea battles, ship to ship battles. Are we going to try to outrun them? Are we going to turn and fight?
Right,
are they firing
decisions.
cannons?
Yeah, all those decisions have to be made.
I think like giving GMs a little bit of an inside track in actual pirate tactics. You wouldn't, like in the movies, they'll do the like side to side and they're exchanging fire. In the actual shipfaring world, you would try to be behind them. You would try to be at an angle so that they couldn't hit you with the guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You fired your cannons at an angle off the side of your ship, at the rear of their ship, because that's where a ship is the most vulnerable. But for gameplay purposes, here is my number one suggestion. One, when a pirate ship is making contact with another ship, follow the frickin' rules that are presented in Pirates of the Spanish Main for the whole closing the distance as a chase thing. Do not try to run that as a vehicular, like, well, we move 12 inches and they move 5 inches. And it gets tedious and boring for everyone. 2, a shot that destroys the enemy ship in one blow is far more dramatic if it destroys the enemy ship's mast and flounders it, because now there's still something there for them to interact with. The occasional shot to the magazine is great where it just splinters everywhere, but if you do that enough, your players aren't getting any loot because of dice rolls on damage, and that gets old very quick.
Yeah, we had that happen. They sank the ship and didn't get to loot it.
What about the boarding? Doesn't the Spanish Main have does the Spanish Main, Pirates of Spanish Main, have specific boarding mechanics?
It's got a couple of different edges for boarding, where you get bonuses to your first attack on boarding and things like that. One of my favorite edges in there is, I think it's called Rope Monkey, where you can basically lift off the deck of your ship or the enemy ship anywhere on the ship and land anywhere else. You can just pick your character up and move them to any other spot. It's your entire round of movement, but you basically just swung way. You did the big cinematic, rope swings, things like that. So there are some rules, but again, it's pretty much just combat. The biggest rule that I know exists, I believe in all 3 settings, is this idea that bigger, longer weapons like two-handed swords and whatnot become very ineffective below decks. Because you start having that issue of you're slamming into the bulkheads and things like that.
Yeah, and there's just no room down there to wield a large weapon.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, part of our combat, part of our ship combat is the whole maneuvering up close enough to where you can actually board, and then we have a boarding action where basically you can take a boarding action. Once you take that boarding action, we go out of ship to ship combat rounds, and we're moving into regular combat rounds at that point, and we have the edges and things like that can help with that.
Trying to think of any other major moments in a pirate type setting that you would need to have, or a pirate type game if you're going to run one that you would need to have.
Well, just searching the deserted island for the treasure. I mean, you need that.
Yeah, you got to have the maps. You got to have the buried treasure on the islands. You got to give the players some time to deal with things like who pulls out the compass and dead reckons on a flat ocean to figure out where we are and where the island we're trying to get to is.
Yeah. I mean, we even have rules for the doldrums, because the doldrums would just fuck ships up.
Right.
And they had a great scene with the doldrums in Black Sails, where they were just out of water and out of food, but they were going nowhere because they didn't have the wind, and they were just stuck. So that's something else you could put into a pirate game is that what happens when you can't go anywhere and you're in the middle of the ocean. That's why a lot of ships used to stay as close to land as they could.
Right, and that opens up the whole issue of like shoals and sandbars. That was another issue, is the fact that you didn't want to get caught out there. Chris, you've mentioned Black Sails a lot. I got to tell you, one of my favorite episodes, and this is the thing, is when I think it's the Spanish crew has the gold, and all of their ship dies because of like the Spanish flu or like influenza or malaria. Disease.
Oh yeah.
Think about disease in a pirate game. Scurvy, malaria, any of that. You have like an allied NPC that just has this nagging cough. What happens next?
The zombie apocalypse starts.
Right.
I was gonna say, I think there's an interesting thing to be said that a pirate game, more than pretty much any other game, suffers if the GM doesn't remember this little thing called weather. Just where the wind is, where it's blowing from and to, whether or not it's blowing anything. Is there a storm on the horizon? Is there, typhoons and whirlpools and all kinds of weather stuff that is huge in pirate stories and should always take some form. A bright, clear day on the sea can be completely changed by the direction the wind is blowing. You put two ships even in ship-to-ship combat and have the one that's trying to get away running against the wind versus running with the wind. Completely changes the encounter. So those are things that as a GM are probably a little more complex in a pirate game, because you can't let them kind of slide like you would in, say, a traditional fantasy game, where you may not ever talk about the weather unless it's a narrative part of the story.
Right. And the whole idea of water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Mm-hmm. I think you could pull some inspiration in a pirate movie out of classic literature. The whole Moby Dick. You sign on as pirates on the ship, and this guy's got an obsession with taking down a certain Spanish pirate, playing out a vendetta, and he's going to use the entire crew and put everybody at risk. And claim they're mutineers if they go against the captain.
I think that would be fun if you had an adventure like that in Rippers, and you had like either a ghost whale or an undead whale you had to deal with.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. And then Art Fernandez brings up an interesting question. That's the shore batteries, where the crew are on a known pirate ship flying pirate colors, and they pull up to, a decent port, and the port just opens up with all the port batteries because they don't want pirates in their city.
Right. Runs down the property values. All right. Well, unless there's anything else in the live stream chat, I think we've pretty much handled the topic of Me Matties ARG pirates.
Just as a preview, because I know what's coming. Isn't the next show taking place in the month of October?
It is. The entire month of October is horror episodes. We're going to be talking a lot about setting mood, running different types of horror settings. There's going to be a lot of discussion about the horror companion. So if you're not familiar with it, tune into that because that will be a great show for a learning experience for some of the noobs who never even cracked the horror companion. A lot of great stuff in that book, really. There really is a lot of great stuff in there.
Yeah, I might actually have to go do a reread on it so I can prepare myself.
Just the ritual magic in it is awesome. The idea of magic ritual is just incredible. There's demons. I mean, if you want to run, you want to rip off Supernatural and just run Supernatural, all you need to do is grab the fantasy or the horror companion. Everything you see in Supernatural is in that book. There's a mechanic for it, cold iron, salting the earth.
I don't know. I hear there's this other book in production that's going to handle Supernatural pretty well too, but we've pimped out enough of his work tonight.
I wonder what book that might be.
Yeah. So on that note, until next time, this is your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning, for Dustin, Dave, and Chris, saying keep rolling and stay savage.